How do we cultivate detachment?
If I give myself to it completely and I don't hold back, then it's very easy to let it go.
Understanding self, understanding nature, how does it all play together?
Because our bodies also come from nature. If you're able to really look within and understand how nature functions inside your body, you will maybe get a glimpse of how she functions outside in the natural world. All of this is only possible if you're detached.
What has been the biggest letting go of your life? Manisha, detachment about dying.
So this journey on the journey to learn about death and dying started for me when my mother decided that she was going to die. Right? She was diagnosed. She was not diagnosed, but we could see that there was something ailing her. And she was observing it, and then she was already 86, and she decided that she was not going to interfere with the process. She had already done a lot of healing for others in her life. So she was very familiar with the way the body functions and the way nature functions. And she had a lot of respect for nature also. So when the body started to, fade, she decided that I will not interfere with this process.
So no medical.
No, she did not want any. She didn't even want any tests to be done or any diagnosis. She said, "I don't need to know. Whatever is happening, let it happen. My only task here is to observe and learn and watch." So
did you all kind of tell her that no? Did you all want her to
no,
take?
my mother was a very strong woman and with a very clear mind.
Okay.
So it was her life, it was her body. So there was no question of trying to convince her. I mean,
Wow.
we did try to say, can we give you some relief in some way? Is there something that we can do? Which we did, whatever she would allow us to do. But she did not want to go down the path of hospitals and doctors and diagnoses and tests and running around. And she didn't want that.
Okay.
This was after COVID, and she had just cruised through COVID. We didn't take the vaccines, and she was very clear about that. Yeah, and I had COVID 3 times, and I came out of it just with homeopathy. So I saw also in her this amazing depth of understanding about the way nature functions in your body. So when she decided that this is the way she wanted to go, we all respected her choice.
Wow.
It was not easy because I was her primary caregiver. So for a year, I had the gift and the opportunity of observing her journey, right? And it was a deep learning for me, and it also changed the way I function in the world. It changed my approach to my own work. I work as an environmentalist. So I realized that actually, if one is trying to understand nature, because our bodies also come from nature, if you're able to really look within and understand how nature functions inside your body, you will maybe get a glimpse of how she functions outside in the natural world, right? So after Mom passed, in her honor, I started a study group called Dying to Learn. And it was in that context that we met in Ahmedabad also. So I think the biggest learning from that was that nature moves in cycles.
Yes.
And we are all an inherent part of nature.
Yes.
We are created by nature. There's no difference between humanity and nature as such. So one has to have respect and faith in her ways,
Nature's ways.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it was absolutely amazing to see that when you don't interfere, when you don't, intervene in natural processes, the suffering is also much less.
Wow.
So we found that, she had a growth in her mouth. So it possibly was mouth cancer, but we don't know because we didn't test it. And we expected, as usually people say, that in cancer, the pain gets worse and worse and whatever. That was not the case with her. So she knew, and we had spoken to her about pain also. She knew, and she said that the body has a threshold of pain, and that threshold keeps on increasing.
So she didn't take painkillers?
So initially when pain first started, for some time she took painkillers, but her need for painkillers went down. And so towards the end, she didn't have any need for the painkillers because her body's pain threshold had gone up. And she was completely lucid. I mean, she wasn't losing her mind. Like, she was a very sharp and very bright intellectual. So she was observing this whole process and giving us her learnings.
So can you share some learnings?
Yeah, so one was this discovery about pain that usually, see, in these days, we want to avoid pain at any cost, right? The minute you have a headache, or the minute you have some period pains for girls, or, it's like pop a pill and just get rid of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Whereas that was not her approach. And when she brought us up, me and my sister, she kind of trained us to endure the pain. And this is when you get this kind of a training young, then as you grow older, you're able to bear more and more pain. And I'm not saying that you should be in a very kind of masochistic kind of thing of putting yourself through pain, but you also recognize that there are kinds of pain. There's a healthy kind of pain, and then there is, where you need to start really getting, you need to look at it deeper. But the healthy pain also, we have wanting to, avoid it.
Can you give me an example, Manisha, about a healthy pain?
So, for example, when you exercise, right? When you exercise, you're pushing your body's limits.
Correct.
Right? And the body needs time to recuperate. So, you might be sore for a few days.
Yes.
That's a healthy pain. Because you're pushing the body's limits and it is pushing back at you. And then together you expand the limits and you take it further. All athletes know this, that there are certain pains that you just have to endure and then they pass.
Yes.
See, the thing is also going through the pain and coming out on the other side
is beautiful.
And you need that experience.
Yeah.
If you're always trying to avoid the pain and say, nahi, you will never know what lies beyond it.
And it's not a part of nature. Nature's cycle.
If you avoid it, then you're not going through the cycle. If you allow the cycle to complete, you can see what's on the other side, right? So in her case, because she did not interfere with the tumor, we were also able to observe, how the body was responding to that. She was up and about and dancing and singing almost up to the very last day, right? A few months before, she was sitting on her sewing machine and making something for herself, So that was the kind of lucidity that she had. Plus, we had so much time with her. We had so much time. And I reduced my workloads and I said, this is the most important thing for me now. So we spoke about so many things that needed resolution. We had a whole year to say goodbye and to sort out any, resentments or grudges that we had. Of course, we sorted out all her matters. All her things were given away to the people she loved. Everything was in its place. So she died very, very peacefully. Yeah.
So, like we execute the will, but you all did it while she was there.
Alive, right.
So she decided what has to be given to whom, and you gave it in front of her.
She gave it.
She
called people and said, "This is for you, and that's for you." And so by the time the body reached its limit.
Wow.
By the time life was already sorted. So we had very little to do after she was gone. Yeah. So all of this is detachment. All of this is only possible if you're detached, right? If you're holding on, if you're clinging and you don't want to let go and it's not that she didn't have those moments, and every time that kind of doubt came up, we would say, "Ma, tu leke jaane wali hai kya?" And then she'd say, "Obviously not." And she'd laugh and say, "Okay, let's just give it away." Right? So detachment is cultivated, and whatever fears that come up, like usually why are we attached? Because there's a fear. A fear of losing something or somebody or some status or some money. That's why we get attached. That's why we hold on. So one has to cultivate detachment, and if you do, then you can die really gracefully.
How do we cultivate detachment? Give me one starter step.
So I think life provides everybody opportunities, and it knocks you left and right, So if you don't let go easily, it will snatch things away from you. This happens to all of us, right? So, and we take our own time. Everybody has a different pace at which we learn. So my marriage came to an end after 10 years, and it was difficult for me because I've had a lot of attachment issues in my life, right? But then these opportunities come, and then you, whether you like it or not, you have to learn, right? And hopefully, the next time around, say the next thing that happens, you're able to let go quicker. So there are opportunities to practice it, and then slowly it evolves. But everybody is unique and everybody is different. So I may be
Yeah,
attached
yeah.
to different things. You may be attached to different things. For some people, it's very easy to say, let go.
How has letting go come to you? What has been the biggest letting go of your life?
So one of the things I learned in my mother's journey is that when you do things fully, like wholeheartedly, like if you, like right now I'm in the middle of leading a campaign, right? So if I give myself to it completely and I don't hold back, then it's very easy to let it go. Because you know you've done your 100%, you've done 150%. You've offered everything that you have or you could to that activity, to that relationship, to that career. So then your heart is content. Then it's very easy to say, हाँ अब हो गया, अब और क्या?
तब consequence से attachment नहीं होता because you've done your best, is it?
Yeah, because उससे आगे आप क्या कर सकते थे, right? You know, आपसे जितना हुआ आपने किया. अब उसका जो भी नतीजा हुआ, उसका जो भी result हुआ, you could not have done more than that, right?
So one way of letting go.
Yeah, so then you're full. So it's very interesting. Like people associate the word detachment with sacrifice or with loss. It's the other way around. When you're feeling really full, it's very easy to let it go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I saw that in her because she had lived life like that. She had given absolutely 200% to everything she took on. And so at the end, she was full, you know, and she was like, done, I'm done, you know.
So Manisha, understanding self, understanding nature, how does it all play together?
So, you know, I grew up in Mumbai and unfortunately we didn't have too much exposure to nature. So it was much later in life that I had the opportunity to be in a natural setting. And from my teacher, my guru, she pointed out to us the importance of service to nature, the importance of nature conservation. And I lived in her ashram for 6 years. And that's really where my exposure to nature happened and my understanding of the beauty and depth of nature. So when I moved to Pune in 2001, I decided to shift my field from architecture to environmental work. Now, initially, you know, we look on the outside. So if you're saying, okay, I love nature, I want to protect nature, in general, usually it's nature outside of you, right? So either you're an animal lover or you want to protect the forest or you want to clean the rivers. And, you know, it's a very external oriented activity when you say that you want to conserve nature. But because I had this upbringing, which had a very deep spiritual aspect to it, and because I really started on this path because of the guidance of my guru, she also pointed out to us that where do we come from? Where do you come from?
From nature.
From nature.
Yeah.
So our definition of nature, so the English word nature is a very limited word. If you look at the way Indian knowledge systems or Hindu philosophy understood nature, it's much, much vaster. It's not just a life form or a species or you know, a plant species. It's not just that. It's an energy. And in the Indian knowledge systems, that energy is an intelligent and a conscious energy. Right? That is what nature is. So the English word doesn't cut it. So we have to step back and say, okay, who is nature? And then who am I? And is there a difference between the two? And if I am coming from nature, like my body, all of this is coming from nature because finally it's the made of the same 5 elements. Right? And it's going to go back into that. So you start getting more and more fascinated. How does all this work? And since you have been given this body, it's a vehicle for you, right? So it is really the field that you have to work with. You keep it healthy, you keep it happy, you keep it active, and you use it in service of others. So it is your first tool to understand nature, right?
Yeah.
So if you understand, like for example, you've just been speaking to health experts, right? So they have a deep understanding of how the body functions. Or if you speak to psychologists, they will have an understanding of how the mind functions. But, you know, Mom used to say that really you have to understand yourself. She always said that, मैं डॉक्टर के पास तो चली जाऊंगी, but डॉक्टर को क्या पता मेरे शरीर में क्या हो रहा है? मुझे पता होना चाहिए ना.
Right.
It's my body.
Right.
Right? I have to be aware that, okay, 5 days ago when I took that blood test, I was feeling low. But today I'm all right. In 5 days, the body has already changed. If I take that result and go to him, he's going to talk about the body 5 days ago. You understand? So she was saying that I have to understand myself first. Right? So through that very close, acute observation of the way your body functions, of the way your thought patterns happen. So if children are taught at a very young age to do self-inquiry and to observe their own selves, then they start understanding that this is how nature functions. And they do that from within, So it's not also just an intellectual understanding. It's not like science says, okay, A plus B equals C. It's not that kind of understanding. But it's really mera anubhav kya hai? Like how do I experience myself? Who is Manisha? Who is Raksha? Who was she 10 years ago? A very different person. Who is she going to be 10 years from now? Who am I? So this is a very classic question that comes up in all spiritual discussion. But it's really, really a critical question, and we don't have the answer because we've not taken the time to pose that question to ourselves. Then who am I really? When my marriage dissolved, of course I grieved because I was like, okay, I'm not anybody's wife anymore. But who was I before I got married? Right? That was a different Manisha. Who was the Manisha during her 10 years of marriage? And who is she now? And who is she going to become? So, if you don't understand yourself, then what are you going to understand of things outside of you? Right? So, self-observation, self-inquiry, self-study is absolutely fundamental to any kind of work that you do. It's not just about nature conservation, but you want to go out and make a good film. You have to learn how to observe. Is it not right? You want to be a good photographer, a good cameraman, right? You have to have the eye. And that eye is an inner eye. It's not just what you see with your physical eyes. You have to be able to see how the light changes. You have to be able to see how her face's expressions have changed. For that, you have to be present. So this is what, to me, self-inquiry and self-study have led me to understand nature better. The other very delightful result of that is that the more you become at ease with yourself, you'll find that the more people become at ease with you, but other life species also become at ease.
Yeah.
You will find that dogs and cats and, they'll just feel very safe in your presence because you are at ease.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. So then nature starts responding to you.
So also, Manisha, because the society and social media, they all they take us away from everything that you're saying, right? So how does one kind of block all that noise and observe, reflect? Give me some practical tools. मतलब हम करें कैसे?
So there are many tools. And we are, I'd like to say this to everyone that if you have been born in India and if you grew up in the Indian culture, you have been very, very fortunate. Because you have the legacy and the heritage of thousands of years of wisdom. See, our education systems don't acknowledge that and they don't recognize it. But we are extremely lucky and blessed to have been born here. My mother used to say that. She used to say कि मुझे 7 जन्म तक सिर्फ भारत में ही जन्म लेना है. Because I have not even touched the tip of the iceberg to discover the beauty of this culture. So there are many tools, many different tools, whatever tool works for you. So like when we were in the ashram, there's karma yoga, there's bhakti yoga, there's jnana yoga. So if you're more an active person, then, you do something that allows you to focus in activity, your mind becomes silent.
Okay.
Right? Like I love painting. So when I paint, my mind is completely at peace.
So that is Karma Yoga.
That's karma yoga.
Okay.
Or if you're more of a, you're a sensitive empath, you're a lover, you're creative, then devotion comes to you easily, right? So that is another part. So that is bhakti yoga.
That is when your mind calms down in bhakti.
Yeah, in each of these, depending on your prakriti.
Got it.
Depending on your personality and the things that make you feel at peace and at ease, you use those tools. So of course now everybody's talking about mindfulness and meditation. When I was a child, I just couldn't meditate. I was just such a restless child that it was just like I didn't meditate till I think after my divorce happened, right? Because it was just not something that came easily to me. But if you gave me some task and you said, Manisha, ye karna hai, I would sit there for 4 hours and I'd be very happy doing it because I was more of a karma yogi. So different tools apply to different people. There's no one size fits all, but there are so many different tools, especially in Indian culture, that you can find the fit for you.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
but your education system, your family, your parents, your teachers, they also have to give you those tools.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
they're pushing you more and more towards AI and
Yeah.
screen time and all of that, then that's what you're getting. Right? So
Yeah. So Manisha, you just mentioned that it's after your divorce you got into meditation.
it's not that I got into it, but it came easier to me because by then I was older. I was in my late 30s already. And so your body also, your physiology also changes. And so I was not that restless anymore. I had been introduced to meditation very young. My father first taught me how to meditate when I was 6 years old because he had already started meditating 4 years prior. So it was in our family. So I knew how to do it, but it's not something that I enjoy doing, let's say. But after the divorce happened, my life calmed down because then I was not so socially active and I had a lot of alone time. So I discovered the beauty and the rasa of meditation after that. So uska samay hota hai.
Yeah. So Manisha, I think we can't let go because we've not really made with the entire cycle of creation, maintenance, and destruction, and then creation again. How do we go back to this? जो शायद हमारे पूर्वज अच्छे से जानते थे और एक्सेप्ट करते थे.
See, if you spend time in nature, if you just garden and you just plant some plants, ठीक है? आपको ये daily basis पे दिखे. ये जो cycle की बात हो रही है ना, you will see how in nature the cycle is happening constantly. And when I first, I love gardening and I have a beautiful terrace garden and I would not allow the gardener to cut anything. And I'd say, nahi, kaato mat kaato. And he'd say, ma'am, but wo aayega phir se, And I realized that why I'm holding on to the tree, I wouldn't allow him to trim it. And then he said, you believe me, just allow me to trim it and you watch how it comes back in full force, So I said, okay, theek hai, he knows better than me. I allowed him to do it. And then, of course, it happens. So what you're saying is very true कि unless you have seen the entire cycle, you can't have faith कि अगर मैं इसको छोड़ दूँ तो मेरे को वापस आएगा, right? So this campaign that I'm just kind of completing now, it's with the Ganesh Utsav. So in the Ganesh Utsav, the last part of the ritual is that आपको विसर्जन करना.
बिल्कुल.
So विसर्जन is what? So when initially we were asking people कि आप विसर्जन क्यों करते हैं? So very few people know why is it important to do Visarjan. Now, after my mother passed away, my mother was quite a skeptic. So she said, I don't want any rituals. I said, नहीं, मुझे करने दीजिए because ये मेरे लिए है. आप तो चले जाओगे, right? So let me do it. So she said, ठीक है, आपको करना करो. So I realized that, when you've seen your mother pass away, you've seen her, like I had actually served her body, right, through that whole year. So you saw how the body was deteriorating, degrading, dissolving. You were seeing the whole thing in front of your eyes. And then at the end, you do the cremation and then all you have left of her is a few ashes, right? And even that, you have to let it go. And you do it and, you're advised to do it in flowing waters. And you see that this water is taking this away from you and you feel that flow happening inside your body. And then you wait. And that experience changes. And after some days, weeks, months, which also the Indian system has very clearly understood, कि कब आपको कैसा अनुभव होगा. And then after the whole year has gone by, you feel the energy come back into you again.
Wow.
Now you have to have the patience, no? अगर आपको सब कुछ जल्दी फटाफट करना है तो वो नहीं होगा.
ये एक बहुत बड़ा issue है.
Right.
Absolutely.
So then now the other thing that why are we so and I'm also tempted with social media and I'm also tempted with AI. It's as much of a struggle. But I realized that sometimes, like say for example, if I'm drawing something or painting something and I'm completely absorbed, I don't care who's put what on social media because I'm so happy doing this, right? And if you see children, it's like that if they get completely absorbed in something, the world doesn't exist for them, right? So in a way, I tell myself that, okay, if I am spending too much time on social media, I'll sit down and chant. Because chanting really absorbs me. And hours can go by and I love being in that chant, right? And then after that, I have no need for that distraction or that social media.
So somewhere there is something which is not fulfilled, which is what we are seeking.
You're trying to fill that gap.
Yeah.
Right? So find something healthier. Whether it's a craft, it's an activity, whether it's a service to somebody, whether it's reading, an activity that is healthy for your mind and body. If you develop those, then your need for screen time goes down. So we work with children also. I have a project called Vasudha, and where we work with underprivileged kids. So we are trying to give them an integrated learning experience and nature education. And we see the difference in them also. We have kids because these are underprivileged kids. So they're coming from poorer backgrounds. Sometimes the kids come in and they're using abusive language, or there's a lot of conflict or whatever. And then after some weeks of spending time with us, because we make them meditate also, and we take them out and spend a lot of time in nature, you can actually see the difference it makes, to their
aggression.
And the whole energy level change.
Wow. Yeah. So, Manisha, you spoke about chanting, Devi Strotam.
Today, I was telling you,
So tell me a little about chanting and how it has calmed you, or what does chanting actually do?
So, there are some indigenous groups that feel that, or they believe that we were not meant to talk. We were meant only to sing.
Wow.
Yeah. So, melody and music is a very inherent part of nature, and part of us also. And the sound vibrations are actually very, very healing, right? So now the problem is when you get words and meaning gets attached to it, and then your mind goes on, spinning and thinking so many thoughts. That's when you don't benefit from the sound energy, right? Which is just pure sound energy. But when you're singing and when you're chanting, and especially when it's repetitive, it has a very calming effect on you, right? So whether you may or may not believe in the deity, like let's say right now I'm enjoying the Devi Stotram, but for the last 4-5 months I was chanting the Vishnu Sahasranam. You start observing that the sound, Sanskrit is such a pure language and such a fundamental, it's sound.
Yeah.
So that sound energy has an effect on your mind and body, So even whether you understand the meaning of it or not, if you simply chant along and you learn how to chant it, it has an effect on you.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I listen to Nirvana Shatakam every day for 2 to 3 hours, and it just, calms my mind down.
Yes.
So, one last question. Manisha, you spoke about your aunt being the first scientist in the village. So tell me a learning from her that you remember.
So my mother's elder sister, my Masi, Dr. Shantu Gurnani. So my mother's family lived in Sindh before the partition. And they were, of course, a very big family, and they had to leave everything like most people who came here. They came during the partition, and so then there was no money. So they spent, they lived on railway station platforms. They had to look for refugee camps. And that was my mother's youth, with no income and no source of livelihood. So they had to rebuild their life from scratch. Now, in that entire family, my mother and this elder aunt were very close to each other, and they were kind of more intellectual than the others. So they had this ambition that they would study. So both of them ended up, they worked their way through. So there was a time when my mother would go to college in the morning at Churchgate, then do a job during the day, and then do another job as a nighttime switchboard operator, and then reach home to the refugee camp at like 12 in the night, wake up at 4 in the morning. This was the kind of life that they led, right? But there was such a desire to study and study further, and that both of them ended up getting scholarships to go to the US. My aunt got a PhD in biochemistry, and my mother had a PhD in economics. But even at that time, they met my father there, who again was studying there. All the three of them, they were very radical people. So they had decided, hum to Bharat wapas jayenge. Like they had no interest in staying on. All of the rest of our family has all chosen to live in the US. These three people said, "Hum वापस आएंगे भारत." And they came back because they had, again, a very strong desire to serve the nation. They all went on to set up their own NGOs and do phenomenal work. Books have been written about them. And my aunt in particular, from her village in Sakhar in Sindh, she was the first person to become a woman scientist. And when she was coming back, I think her father didn't really comprehend the depth of her achievement. So my grandfather told her that एक सिलाई machine लेके आना so you can earn something when you're back, you know. But yeah, this was my upbringing. These are the kind of elders that I grew up with, and that made all the difference. Yeah.
My God, but कुछ याद है? मासी ने कुछ कहा, your aunt?
So actually, my Masi and I were very close friends, and then I was studying architecture in Ahmedabad. So she was at the BARC, she did cancer research, she did a lot of work. Then around in her 50s, she realized that she was not getting the answers that she was seeking in science.
And?
So it was interesting that the three of them, my father was the Bhakta, and these two ladies were Jnana Yogis.
Jnana
Yeah, in a way, my mother was a Karma Yogi,
yeah.
but my aunt was a Jnana Yogi. So I had all three, we had all three.
Wow.
And there was constantly this discussion and debate going on between the three of them. And, you know, they were all seekers. So at 50, then my Masi said, no, this science is not doing it for me. I have to find my answers elsewhere. And she went and joined and studied with Swami Chinmayananda. So for the next 30 years of her life, she was serving with the Chinmaya mission. So she became a brahmacharini. And in those years, I spent a lot of time with her.
So you remember anything which kind of stuck to you?
I think in general, it was just her sincerity of her searching, you know, and that scientific framework of her mind. I really absorbed that. And interestingly, I also observed her passing. So that she passed away several years before my mother. So, and in our home only. And when she was going through, so the doctor said, okay, we'll give her 24 hours. And after that, she was with us for 3 weeks. But during those 3 weeks, being the scientist that she was, she kept on observing kya ho raha hai. And we would ask her, ki, ab kya ho raha hai? What are you feeling now? At that time, we had discovered this book called the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying.
I've read that, yeah.
And so parallelly, as she was going through her last journey, we were reading the book. And things that she was telling us were actually reflected in what was written in the book. So we were simply blown away because she had not read that book. She was actually living it or dying it, if you say. And she was explaining to us, you know, what was going through her mind, what was the feelings that were happening.
Do you remember anything?
Yes, I do. So in the Tibetan tradition, and even in the Hindu tradition, they talk about how the 5 elements that your body is made of, one by one, they withdraw.
Okay.
So when the element withdraws, there are certain symptoms that you will see physically. Emotionally, the person will experience certain symptoms, you know, and those have been described in that book. So it starts from the most densest material, which is earth. So when the earth element withdraws, the person feels like they are sinking. So my Masi kept telling my father कि मुझे ऊपर उठाओ, ऐसा लग रहा है कि मैं, you know, I'm falling in somewhere. Please lift me up. And she keeps saying कि पीछे pillows लगाइए, you know. And she was already, there were like 20 pillows under her. She was still getting that sensation कि I am sinking, right? Then after that comes water, I think. So then she'd say ऐसा लग रहा है कि मैं बहती चली जा रही हूँ, you know. And of course, again, because she had spent a lifetime of very acute observation in her work as a scientist and in her years practicing her sadhana, that's why at the end, she could acutely observe what the dying process was about and share it with others.
Okay.
Whenever she was conscious and whenever she had enough energy. So we got like a practical lesson. Okay, this is how the dying process happens.
So एक-एक करके elements leave you.
They don't leave you, they get reabsorbed. So they withdraw, you know, and then one by one, when all the elements withdraw, and then finally the soul leaves the body.
So that is the air.
So the soul is it's not an element. It is an, I don't know, you
soul
can
is
say,
not an element.
Yes, yeah.
We don't know what soul is.
Yeah, you have to experience it. And I think sometimes we don't have definitely not in the English language, but we don't have the verbal tools to explain the inner experiences, right?
Yeah.
So it reaches a point where then you have to be silent. And in that silence, then the understanding comes. You can't keep on talking and talking and talking about it. You have to just experience it. Yeah.
Beautiful. So I'm reading this Tara Swart. I don't know if you know her.
No.
She's a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist
Okay.
from India, now lives in the UK. And she lost her partner to cancer and in 4 weeks. And so she speaks about these 4 things. She says that about the field, the consciousness, and being a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist. And she says you have to believe that signs hote hain. So there was a very interesting thing where she said that I felt my husband, my husband's soul was communicating with me. And she said I couldn't accept it being a scientist, that how is this possible? So she challenged, the science, and she said that, listen, if you are communicate, she challenged this surreal, esoteric thing. And she said, listen, if you are trying to talk to me, I'm picking the word phoenix, and you tell me through this word that you are actually talking to me. So she was traveling somewhere for talk, her flight got delayed, and she landed up at Phoenix Airport, which she was not supposed to do. She said, okay. So she spoke about 4 things. One was that you can communicate if you are open. She spoke about every time we do something new, the neurons fire and wire. And the third thing actually, which you've been talking about, is we do not notice beauty enough. So she says, just open and see there is beauty in everything, but we are just rushing past. And the 4th she said was, I don't remember, but deep breathing. So she says the only way we can connect is if we just, as much as possible, we just go into a deep breathing state. I don't know if you want to check out her thing.
Yeah, I will for sure. I think one thing that now it's been 24 years that I've been working on environmental issues. And one thing definitely I'm very clear about is that nothing is impossible. That the mysteries of nature are so vast, and our capacity to understand and comprehend it is so limited that I now don't say, oh, that's impossible. So for me now, nothing is impossible. It's just about whether I have evolved enough to be able to understand it or not.
So there is another guy called Vivaldo, I'll tell you, but I think he's going to indigenous tribes in the Amazon, people who've never really interacted with anybody outside. And he is speaking about their just tremendous love, respect for nature. And there was this one study where in that particular tribe, not a single person has had dementia, where I think 1 in 3 people in America have dementia after 85.
Yeah.
So I agree that world is so vast, we've not even begun to understand it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Manisha.
Raksha. It was lovely talking.
Bye.